Welcome back to another KCSN draft show presented by some of our favorite partners, Holiday Distillery. Shout out to Holiday Distillery. We love them. They always let us come out and use their facilities during the draft, so we get to go live talking to you guys from the distillery, one of our favorite partners since we have started KCSN. And then today, I'm excited. I'm joined by one of my favorite guests. We had him on last year. We got Mike Renner coming in here to talk a little bit offensive line with us today. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we appreciate you taking some time to do it. I think we were just kind of talking a little bit right before this and just, saying like, hey, what positions do we have left that you want to talk about? And you had said you thought the offensive line group kind of as a whole was the most interesting. So like, what is it about this offensive line group in general that you just kind of find intriguing for this draft class?
I think it's interesting that so many of them are not clean offensive tackles. I think we'll get a lot of first round offensive tackles or guys that at least played offensive tackle in college. But between, I think, Caden Proctor from Alabama, Spencer Fano from Utah, Francis Mauigoa from Miami, who might be the three best offensive linemen in this draft class. Depending on who you talk to, certain people want to move certain of those guys to interiors, like to guard or to center in Fano's case. So I think it's not a clean offensive tackle class in that regard, but it's a deep one. I expect all those guys to be first rounders on top of, I think we could see 7 or 8 first round offensive linemen this year. So it's not bereft of talent. It's just bereft of like really true clean projections.
And I think that's kind of like a good personification of the whole draft class, right? Like there's good, like every draft class is always going to have good players, right? I don't ever mean to say any class is weak. It's just everything gets a little more random. But this year it feels like everybody kind of has like this fatal flaw. Every prospect at any position, just like, hey, you're really good at, here's a couple things. And then here's a reason you might not be good at all at the NFL, or you could kind of flame out. And it just feels like this draft class in general has more guys that I think have those big flaws. And I think this offensive line class is probably a pretty good example of that.
Yeah, I think there's maybe 2 guys that don't, and they play running back and linebacker. Right? Like the rest, there's just a big, what are we going to, Arvell Reese, it's like the dude didn't even rush the passer. That's what you're drafting him for. Ruben Bain is historically short arms. These are guys who are top 5 picks. Caleb Downs is awesome, but he's, got one of the smallest wingspans for, you'll probably have the smallest wingspan of first round safety in decades. So there's just nothing about this class that's easy and makes your evaluation easy.
Yeah, no, it's just, it's like a dirty class to try to put into rankings, but here we are. We are in draft month as we go through this, so we got to put it into rankings. So let's start with offensive tackle today, and we don't need to go 1 through X number, but just give me like your top tier of tackles and kind of who's in that group and kind of what separates them, I guess, from the next group of guys.
My top tier tackle is just 2 guys, and I see it as Caden Proctor and Spencer Fano. I think from just a ceiling perspective, those are the 2 guys I see with the highest ceiling. I think they both, for their respective sizes, move extremely well. Now, for their respective sizes, you got to say for Caden Proctor because he's so much bigger than everyone else, right? He's 350 plus. He's never going to be, a 320-pound tackle. He is always going to be a jumbo guy. And so you got a couch in that. But I think for that size, I haven't seen a guy. I mean, Jordan Mailata is the only one I've seen in recent years. And obviously, he wasn't even a tackle coming. Like no one moves that well at that size. Even guys like Evan Neal in recent years, J.C. Latham, Amarius Mims, who have been like huge offensive tackles. I think he moves the smoothest, the easiest, has the best balance of the bunch. And yeah, there's bad tape for him. And yeah, there are weight concerns that he did fluctuate at Alabama. But when he was light, end of the last season, I thought his tape was awesome. And he's gotten better every single year. He's played a lot of football. So I just think his ceiling is, Pro Bowl, all pro. I think similarly for Fano, he's the best mirror in this draft class. He has the best feet. He's the best zone run blocker. I think for a zone scheme, this guy is just a plug and play tackle who will be decade plus starter for you. So those 2 I just feel the cleanest about at tackle. But even after that, so that's my tier 1. But like even after that, I kind of like the tier 2, tier 3 in this draft class. I think, again, I see 8 guys as top 32 on my draft board. At offensive line, not all of them necessarily tackles, but along the offensive line.
Yeah. So, okay, we'll get to those next years. Let's go back to Proctor, I think, because he's an interesting one because a lot of, not everybody, but a lot of people are a little lower on him after this past year. I think what happened is a lot of people kind of expected to see a little bit more like linear progression. And he started this year, it sounded like he was still weighing well up into the 300s. And that tape from the beginning of the year definitely had a little bit more, what's going on here? But as the year went on, I thought he got better. I thought you could see he started to move better as the weight was coming off and he got into better shape. And the explosiveness that he plays with is out there. But some people just seem to be a little bit lower on him. So like you already kind of talked a little bit about it. Like what do you see his projection like going into the NFL and how that's going to translate a little bit that keeps him up in this top tier after this past season?
Yeah, I mean, when you're drafting an offensive lineman top 10 or tier 1 offensive tackle like we're talking about, you don't really want games like he did against FSU in his last year. Right? It was a bad game. Like it was terrible tape. And it's not like FSU's throwing out first round edge rushers this year, right? It wasn't against high end guys. So that's the worry. I go towards the end of the season, though. He did face some higher end guys. I loved his tape against R. Mason Thomas. I thought he resoundingly won that. And R. Mason Thomas is a tough edge rusher. It's just a tough guy, especially for someone like Caden Proctor.
For a big guy. Yeah.
Yes. Like that is exactly what he should struggle with. And he didn't in that one. So that was the game that really sold me as like, hey, he can do it. And then I add in the fact that he's the youngest offensive lineman in this draft class, I guess tied with Francis Marianoa. They have the exact same birthday. They are still 20 years old. They'd be 20 years old on draft day. So that youth, that freakishness, the progression throughout the season, and the fact that like weight concerns in college, if you're a top 10 pick in today's day and age with all the resources at your disposal, with agents in your ear the way they are, it's been so infrequent that we've seen guys really eat themselves out of the NFL, right? Like the Eddie Lacy's of the world. Those stories have become increasingly rare. So I'm not as worried as, maybe, again, like his track record would suggest. Those things tend to get ironed out when you have millions of dollars riding on the line here.
Yeah, and then with Spencer Fano, we're going to ask about every single player and how they fit with the Chiefs, but Fano is a guy that has been getting a lot of mock drafts to the Chiefs throughout this process. And as a Chiefs fan, it's always a little surprising because he has incredibly short arms, right? And like I know they grew a little bit at the pro day, but if you look at the history of Chiefs offensive tackles, Andy Reid, that coaching staff has always liked really big, long arm tackles. What would you say, not necessarily about the fit or anything like that, but more so, why would Spencer Fano be worthy of a team that typically likes longer arm tackles and taking that kind of like outlier on him to play tackle in the NFL?
Well, technically at his pro day, he was just an eighth of an inch less than Josh Simmons last year.
That is
so
true.
Simmons was kind of an outlier, and truthfully, he moves like Simmons does. And so that's the intriguing thing for me. And if he's on the board, that he would be my top pick for the Chiefs specifically, is because he allows you to, I think he's versatile. Like if he's double teaming with Trey Smith, he can not only generate movement as like a deuce block in a gap scheme, but he can also really get out on the move. And so I like that potential of what he could be as just an athlete in that scheme. Now I'd like Francis Marianoa there too. I think both those guys on the right side fit in their different ways. But to me, he's just the higher end pass protector right now. And his traits profile to that at the NFL level. Short arms I am worried about. It seems like there's a lot of guys in that range, though, that have gotten it done in recent years. It's more, do you have the athleticism to make up for it? Do you have the craftiness to make up for it? And on tape, I think I saw that already from him.
Yeah, and I think us as Chiefs fans, when we think about Josh Simmons, we were just kind of excited to get him at where they got him, that people kind of skipped over the fact that his arms were quite a bit shorter than what they typically like at the position, and we hadn't really connected all those dots when we're thinking in the grand scheme. So I understand that, especially with the movement, there's definitely that similar movement style between the two, so you could see if they like Simmons, how they could also like Fano. I think that's a great connection point there. Let's move on. That second tier of tackles, you said you had another group of guys right there. So who is in this second tier? And, which one of those guys do you think, if any of them, stand out a little bit more than the others?
I'll just give my second tier of offensive linemen because it's Vega Ioane, it's Caleb Lomu, and it's Francis Marianoa. I kind of like Marianoa more at guard than I do at tackle. Now, in certain schemes, I think he can for sure play tackle, but his superpower is getting his hands on guys like quickly. I think in space, he's okay. I thought that his biggest issues came in that regard, and they did a lot in the Miami offense to protect their tackles because the guy on the left side was actually even a worse mover than Maui. Like the guy on the left side, Markel Bell, is freaking enormous. Like they really had to, they did a lot of quick pass game, a lot of screens, a lot of stuff that was not 7-step, what you'll see, especially with the Chiefs and the deep drops they take. So like he'll have to be a little bit more protected at the NFL level in that regard. But once he gets his hands on guys, he was probably the best in this draft class. Like his hand strength, his core strength, it's all elite. And in the run game, he can really generate movement. So big fan of his. I just think that's a skill set that I would rather have at guard, and it could be like an all-pro guard at the next level. And Vega Ioane, like very similar players. To me, the difference between them is one plays right side, one plays left side. Like, do you need a right guard or do you need a left guard? That one, the side would break the tie seemingly between the two of those guys. They're just very good football players. Lomu is, I'm probably a little higher on him than most, but I just see such natural coordination and athleticism in a way I don't necessarily see it for kind of the next group of tackles. Monroe Freeling, Blake Miller, Maxi Anacho. I kind of see similarly in that there's just a little, there's a feet and hand coordination that's missing when you watch them on tape. That it's fine. You can get by with them. They can be good offensive tackles because they're so athletic. But Lomu, you just see him, it looks easy for him in his pass sets. You see him using independent hands already in a way that doesn't look like it's necessarily taught. It just looks like he knows how to get the job done. And I think the more he progresses physically from a play strength perspective, the more he'll just flourish at the NFL level.
No, and I'm glad you mentioned Lomu because I didn't want to ask about him because you had him in this tier. And I feel like I'm somebody that's a little bit higher on him too. I mean, the athleticism pops, the coordination, the ability to play, I think like outside of his frame, but in an athletic way, not in a clunky way, really stands out. And then like there's the obvious issue of he's a young player, doesn't have he's got a good amount of experience, but doesn't have a ton of play strength, and that's going to have to get better. He really reminds me a little bit of, and I don't, again, keep needing to come back to the Chiefs, but Eric Fisher coming out of Central Michigan, where it's like, wow, the athleticism is all over the place. Good frame, good size. You just have to get stronger before we know what we have in you. And so like when I watched Lomu, I kept getting those same flashes, and I just feels like people are really down on his just general play strength. And I think that's something that's probably not easy, but something that is very fixable at the next level when you have more resources.
Yeah, and when you're, a redshirt sophomore coming out, 21 years old, it's different than if I'm trying to fix a 6-year guy's play strength.
Right.
So it's happened a lot. I think David Bakhtiari is one of the best examples of that. Is that he fell to fourth because he was like 299 pounds coming out of Colorado, and was forced into starting year one, and you saw the natural coordination. You saw it, but like he would get bull rush play after play after play. And that was his biggest weakness. And then by his third, fourth year in the NFL, all of a sudden it was good enough and you couldn't bull rush him anymore. So that's how I feel about Lomu. I mean, the testing numbers on him were awesome too. I mean, a sub 540, over 30-inch vertical, 9.5 broad jump, like truly great numbers for a guy, 313 pounds. So I buy, given that he's a great athlete, given that he's super coordinated, I buy the trajectory.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like he's gotten quite like that. Like I'm a kind of freakish athlete bump that we usually see tackles get. And I think it's because the guy you mentioned, Monroe Freeling, is getting all of that exact type right now. And so I think you said that you had Freeling, Ian Nachor, and Blake Miller in your next tier. Was there somebody else that I was missing there?
Ian Nachor, the Arizona State offensive tackle.
All right. So of those three, if you saw one of them that came out into the NFL and had the best career, which one of those guys do you think has the highest ceiling of that group?
That's interesting because I think Ian Nachor is the highest ceiling. I think he's just spectacular all around athlete. These three are all right. I think testing wise, they ended up coming just truly special. I think Monroe Freeling was like a top 5 all time RAS.
Right.
But Ian Nachor, I just see a little better posture consistently. I see really good feet from him on tape, and with him, he's only been playing football for 5 years. He started playing football when he got to college, which like those guys always intrigue me. The position changes, the guys who are new to the position, because you talk to any offensive lineman, it's hard to unlearn bad habits. It's easier to get a guy who's never done it before and teach them good habits. And I think you see that with him on tape. He does, he's got a long way to go, but the fact that he's already played so well, so early, and I watched his tape against David Bailey, and he held his own in that game in a way that few others did. Spencer Fano is probably the only other one in college football that held their own against David Bailey last year. So very impressed with that, his ability to match speed. So I think he has the highest ceiling. I think Monroe Freeling, though, has the highest floor of those. I think he's just such a good athlete, such a translatable specimen in that he has length, he has incredible core strength, and he has, just his ability and consistency in pass protection already. Now, I think he's a little bit more robotic, and I think you see that really in the running game when he has to handle something that he wasn't quite expecting. You see a lot of tough tape in the running game. But I can't believe how effective he was in pass protection because, like I said, he is a little robotic in pass protection too, but seemingly got the job done very well.
Right. And so like Freeling, and we were just talking about Lomu, Freeling is a guy that when he gets out of like his frame and a little off balance, he's a guy that I know he's a super athlete, but he just looks like he's chasing positions to get back into the right spot a little more to me. So like, that's why I do think that there's a little bit of a difference when I watch Freeling and Lomu. It's just one guy looks comfortable playing not in perfect posture, whereas Freeling, you can tell is trying to get back to that spot so he can feel comfortable again.
100%. I love that. I love that assessment. That's exactly what I say.
And Blake Miller, just real quick touch on that. A lot of people, I think he's gotten a lot more not publicity, but like a little bit of hype. He's kind of climbing up draft boards here as we get into these last couple weeks and stuff like that. I liked Blake Miller. I don't see a super high ceiling for him, but he's played so much football that you think he's gonna, you see how he can translate and just be a quality player. I just fall a little bit shorter on a ceiling. What do you see with him that keeps him down here in this group and maybe not up in that second tier?
Yeah, I mean, he's got some of the same stuff with Freeling of handling unexpected, but I was floored with, because I've watched, he's been starting since freshman year at Clemson, so fairly highly rated recruit. And I remember watching his junior tape in like preseason scouting and just being like, dude, this isn't even a day two guy for me. I was very underwhelmed, despite seeing it like a great athlete, right? Despite already seeing that he's super explosive. I couldn't believe the transformation he made from junior to senior year. So that's what really I'm buying into, is that maybe this guy is just going to work his ass off to get where he needs to go, because I don't think he is the best, the most fluid of tackles. I think he really struggles with inside moves on tape. But I saw a guy who just like, he eats contact so well. Is just so solidly built as an offensive tackle. And that's just a great starting point when you're projecting the next level, when you have to deal with stronger guys.
Yeah, and I think he missed like 3 or 4 practices all his entire career at Clemson. And like one of those, he had like a broken wrist and was back at practice the next day. Like the toughness, the mentality, you won't ever like get somebody that's better, that scores higher in that regard. So that's the top 3 tiers. I'm going to ask you about, give me 1 to 2 more names. They can be top one, like Fringe top 100, day 3, just any other offensive tackles that you kind of think that you would ride for on draft night if you had to.
Yeah, so day 1, that's it. Like those are the guys I would even consider. Day 2, there's a few guys I like that I think could just end up starting. I think they fall to day 2 because they don't have high ceilings. There's no real, trying to think, like the past few years, there's been like a Blake Fisher. There was, I can't even remember, the Yale tackle that went to the Bears. I don't see any like Charles Grant last year, like true athletic project freak who's going to go day 2. Like Kingsley Suamadi, I think was that, athletic project freak, day 2 offensive tackle. There's none of those in this class. Unless Yanatra falls to day 2. But I think there's a few guys who I would call like high floor, low ceiling tackles that you could maybe get by with them starting. It's Caleb Tiernan from Northwestern. It's Trey Zune from Texas A&M, Carver Willis from Washington, and then Travis Burke from Memphis. Those 4 guys, I'm like, you squint and you see potential to spot start there at tackle. So it's not completely bereft of talent, but if you're like searching for, franchise left tackle, doubt you're going to find it on day 2.
If there was one of those guys that, you had to say, okay, I think this guy's going to make it in the NFL, which one of those guys would you go with?
I get Zune from Texas A&M.
Yep.
Just because he was already as good as he was in pass pro in the SEC. And I go even to the playoff against Miami, and I thought he held his own against Ruben Bain in a way I didn't expect, because he's not particularly strong. That's his biggest issue, and why people want to move him inside, is that his play strength is poor. And unlike Lomu, he is older, and he is and 23, a fifth-year guy coming out. So that's how much better is he going to get? But even, in the rigors of the SEC, he was great in pass pro. And compared to his teammate Chase Basantis, who's probably going to go higher, and it was that left guard, it's like he started before him and he started at left tackle, and he doesn't have ideal left tackle traits either. And they didn't put Basantis at left tackle; they put Zoom. So it speaks to just how the A&M staff felt about him in pass protection. So maybe he gets kicked inside to guard, maybe gets kicked inside to center, but I think even at either of those, I trust him in pass protection. The guy knows what he's doing.
Yeah, a lot of experience in the SEC. Got it early for a team that has churned out, NFL players along the offensive line over and over again, and he was a guy that they trusted. So always worth noting. That's offensive tackles. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back and talk some more interior offensive linemen.
Just a short drive from Kansas City. Experience the history, the heritage, and the bourbon at Holiday Distillery. Tour Missouri's oldest distillery, where real Missouri bourbon is made the old-fashioned way. Walk the grounds, taste the tradition, and take home a bottle of something special. Make the trip, sip the story. Holiday Distillery, Weston, Missouri. Book your tour at holidaydistillery.com.
My name is Terrell Jolly. A lot of people call me TJ, founder and CEO of Integrity Capital Management. So Integrity Capital Management originally started out as a property management firm, but we slowly transitioned to what is described as an incremental development firm that's focused on situational housing. I know most people say affordable, but we believe in creating housing for people that are actually in need and built to the end user. I believe everyone needs a home, because when you have home, you have hope. The reality is that when you're building a business, one thing you don't think about is like what a true banking relationship means. And, I had the honor and privilege of meeting Debbie early on in my career when I was just trying to get going. And as a small business, it's really challenging at times because people don't understand the concept or not believe the longevity because you're just getting started. But Debbie was willing to take a chance on me, be patient with me. I almost look at it like a grassroots initiative. She's seen and believe what I'm about. Anybody that's really true about their business and want to get some things done, I would definitely trust hands down Emprise, because Deb's team, along with Aaron and Jackie and all the amazing people that work behind the scenes, even from the treasury side, I would say, hey, give them an opportunity, because you won't be disappointed and you will actually be in hands that actually somebody care and that will see you from start to finish.
Welcome back to the KCSN Draft Show. I am here with Mike Renner, and we are talking offensive linemen. We have just finished up our offensive tackles. Now we're going to jump to the interior. And I know you'd already mentioned earlier, we talked about Maigoa, Ione. Is there anybody else that you would put in that kind of upper tier on the interior offensive line with those two, or those two kind of by themselves?
No, I think they're by themselves. Those are what I would call first round guard or interior offensive line prospects. The guys after that, I think there's probably 4 guys I'd call second round, like a tier 2, but they just don't quite have the physical profile and the tape that I would feel comfortable on day 1. But I think there's some guys that I think are very solid, safe prospects on day 2.
Yeah, no. So let's talk about some of those day 2 guys. I think those 2 top guys as guards, everybody understands. And even if some people think Fano is going to move inside, I think you could put him right there in that top group too. These very good players that you don't really have any questions about how they're going to translate if you're making them play on the inside. Let's hear about these, second rounders, the second tier of interior offensive line guys.
So I would split them into guards and centers at this point, because the guys who've played center are Sam Hack from Kansas State and Conor Liu from Auburn. Just haven't watched their tape, watched their careers. It's just like they are safe centers. They know what they're doing. I'm not moving them to guard. They don't really have that body type, but like at center, plug and play, so technically sound. They fight really hard on the interior. I don't think either are particularly impressive athletes, but I remember back when I was at PFF, we ran studies on this. The position that had the least athletic basis to success in the NFL was center. Like, you do not need to be an athlete to play center in the NFL. It helps, right? It helps everywhere, but like that's the one that is truly. So from that perspective, it's like the most skilled position, and those guys are super skilled. So when you see it, you can feel good about them probably translating to the NFL. So those 2 at center, and at guard, I love Chase Basantis from Texas A&M. I love Keelan Rutledge from Georgia Tech. Another one where it's like, hey, the side will probably break the tie. Basantis has been a left guard over the course of his career.
Yeah.
Rutledge, a right guard at Georgia Tech. They're both, I think Basantis a little bit better in pass pro, Rutledge a little bit better in the running game. Both super physical, though. Both good enough athletes. I wouldn't put them in like special athletes. Both more than good enough athletes to be quality starting guards in the NFL. I just don't know if I see like all pro type of guys, but truly quality starters that you're not going to be unhappy if you draft them in the second round.
Yeah, Rutledge is an interesting guy because if you're somebody that is looking for, if your offensive line needs an edge, you need a little bit of an a-hole to step in there. Like
Right.
He is the guy that I think is going to absolutely be high up on people's list, and you want to run the ball. He makes a ton of sense. Whereas Basantis, I think, like you said, he's a little bit better in pass pro, a little bit more, not just more athletic, but better in space, I guess is the best way to go about it. So like, I think you can split those guys up into slightly different systems or schemes. And I think you can kind of get an idea of what teams may or may not be looking for on the offensive line and where they would fit better. And I think with the interior offensive line, it's a solid group, I think, on day 2, but I do think you can start to make these distinctions pretty well throughout the rest of the day 2 or the top 100 picks here. Where we going? All right, and the next up, let's go to the next tier. I mean, we don't know if we're in a tier now. Anybody else that you think kind of goes in the top 100 or is in your top-ish 100 in the interior offensive line? We can split up into center, guards, however we want to go about it here.
I would throw Emmanuel Pregnon in there. Now he's, again, I think he's clear tier behind the guys I've talked about already.
Yeah.
In terms of how safe I feel about him. He's a little bit older, but I would put him as more of like a gap scheme guard. I don't think he doesn't have the coordination of the two guys we talked about already, but like in a phone booth, he is so physically imposing. I mean, the guy is 320 plus, and he's built like a rock. I mean, like the definition this guy has for an interior offensive lineman is stupid. So like you're not going to overpower him on deuce blocks, ace blocks, things of that nature, like the double teams. He can really move people off the line of scrimmage. I just don't know if he's really there in pass pro the way the other two guys are. And Oregon's scheme does a great job of protecting their offensive line a good amount. So you really didn't see him tested the way you saw those other guys tested this year. But I like him. I think he'll be a quality player. I think I only have one more interior offensive lineman. And this one's kind of, I don't want to say a huge reach, but like I like Keegan Trost from Missouri.
Okay.
He was their right tackle. I wish we would have seen him in the bowl games. He didn't get to play there, but he's a 6-year guy. He's not super physically impressive, but he is just so darn skilled. I don't know how he got the job done as consistently as he did in the SEC. I think if you're drafting around, this is more back end of the top 100. If you draft that guy like 80 to 100, I just think he can be a competent starter. He's played a ton of football and he's improved every single time. So I don't think he's a top 100 guy for a lot of people, but for me, I think you're getting a starter if you get draft Trost.
Yeah, and there's like a sound technical aspect to what he does. He doesn't get overwhelmed. And like, out of offensive tackle, I don't think that there's going to be many people that see him still playing at tackle at the next level. But when you kick him inside, I think you do kind of get rid of some of those concerns that a lot of people are going to have about the athleticism, the ability to just maximize and play with length on the outside. So Trost is a good one. And that kind of takes me to the next point because he would have counted for this. But if you were to pick another guy outside, on day 3, a guy or two on day 3 that you feel confident is going to kind of outplay or outperform their draft stock, who would that be?
Oh, that's a great question. It's offensive line class. Well, maybe some of the guys I think I've said already might fall to day 3. Like Zune could be a day 3 pick. Travis Burke could be a day 3 pick. Wouldn't surprise me. There's one other guy though that actually I just realized I also had in my top 100, but I had him at offensive tackle. Because he played offensive tackle at Oregon, but I think he goes interior in the NFL. Alex Harkey. I think he definitely the right tackle there at Oregon this past year. He's right tackle at Texas State, I believe, before that. He's another one of those guys where I just like the way he moves, man. I love his body control. And I think he was very much out of his depth at tackle because he has shorter arms. And he jumped up a big level going from Texas State to Oregon. But I think if you put him at guard, you alleviate a lot of his issues that I saw on tape, and he could be a starting guard for you. So I think Alex Harkey like I said, I doubt he goes top 100, but he's a guy I would bet could break into a starting lineup.
Yeah, no, that's a good one to pull out there because they did. He takes up the step. He goes to Oregon, and you look at the Texas Tech game there later on, even I think a little bit. I know he's banged up, if I remember right, a little bit throughout the year, but you look at some of like the high profile matchups, he definitely seemed like he was struggling with some of the athletes that he saw on the edge. But if you can limit the amount of space he's having to go with, I definitely think you could see him be a much better player and kind of play just a little bit closer to what he was able to show coming into it. I mean, even at tackle, I don't think there was a huge difference. I know people have talked about Isaiah Worlds a little bit, like still having some hype into him. I watched the two of them play, and I don't think there was a huge difference to me at all on like which one I'd rather have. I might even playing tackle. I might even rather have Harkey because I did not see it with Worlds either.
Worlds is after the ACL tear, unfortunately. I think he's late to the 3.
Yeah. All right. One last question here before I'll get you on out of here. We're going to make this a little Chiefs specific here, but Kingsley Sumatia moves over to left guard this past season. I don't know how much Chiefs you watched, like you really got to dive in and stuff, but from what you did, how did you think that Kingsley performed at left guard? And do you think the Chiefs should go out of their way to try to replace him, or do you think they should feel pretty good about what he showed his first season moving there?
I think he was adequate. I wouldn't put him as special or anything, but he definitely, a lot of the issues you saw at tackle got better when you moved him inside. Yep. Just the issues you saw out in space. And I didn't, on his tape at BYU, I don't know if I saw high-end potential despite like high-end athleticism and high-end testing numbers, but he is another one of those guys that I kind of touched on when I talked about Blake Miller, where he's so solid that he gives you firm pockets. I think is his biggest selling point is that he's not really getting work back. Now, you might whiff a bunch, but like he can at least give you firm pockets. So you got 2 guards there in him and Smith that will give you those when they are on. So I would say have patience with him at guard. That's your starting guard. You got bigger fish to fry in terms of this roster and like long-term at offensive tackle. I don't know if Jalen Moore is your long-term right tackle right now.
Yeah, and just going to ask a little second part question. I'm with you on Kingsley. I mean, I thought he got better as the year went on. Some of those big misses that were there early in the year, he did clean up a little bit. They're still going to be there, right? He throws his hands with a lot of bad intentions and gets off balance a ton, but I didn't see anything that makes me think the Chiefs have to replace him anytime soon. You had mentioned earlier that you think Fano would be a great pick for them at pick 9. Do you think the Chiefs should be looking? I mean, it sounds like it with that. Should be looking to draft their kind of Jalen Moore either replacement or successor in the top 10 this draft? Or should that be more of somebody they try to wait and see what happens with pick 29, 40, and see if there's a value later on?
No, I would not look anywhere else. I mean, the only way I wouldn't draft a tackle this year if I were the Chiefs is if Ruben Bain falls to me. That's the only way. You are not going to be drafting top 10 anytime soon, right? Or hopefully, right? If you're the Chiefs, historically, if you're a betting man, you're not drafting above 16 anytime soon. It's just like, so you're not going to find a good offensive tackle. It's going to be very difficult for you to find that next starting offensive tackle. You just look at the hit rate in the 20s at that position, and it's shaky. It's one of the easier positions to identify top end talent because of how physically demanding it is. It's the most physically demanding position in the NFL, truly, in terms of the cutoffs. So for all those reasons, you're in a great spot. You might have OT 2 in terms of who's sitting at you, looking at you at pick 9.
Right.
If that's the case, I think you take it. And you take a guy who, to make sure that going forward, the 2 times you lost the Super Bowl doesn't happen again, right? Why are the 2 times they lost the Super Bowl? What was the case? It was the offensive line got manhandled. There were, injuries happen and whatever, but like, make sure that's not the case. Make sure Patrick Mahomes has a chance the next 2 times. The next time you're in the Super Bowl. If you give him a chance, chances are you'll probably win it. So that's where I am on the Chiefs, is that keep that offensive line a strength and invest in it with pick 9 and maybe even a guy in day 2. Just like make sure that never happens again. Because if it doesn't happen again and you have Patrick Mahomes, chances are you'll be there.
Yeah, you're not picking here again. So if you get a top 10 level offensive tackle, that certainly is not a player that you can expect to get a Josh Simmons to fall because of whatever reasons last year ever again, if you were picking in the back half of first round. So that fully understand that side of it. Mike, thank you so much for joining me, talking through some offensive linemen. Where people are listening now that don't already, where can they go listen to you, find what you're doing right now as we lead up to the draft?
Yeah, you can find my takes on the Push in the Pile podcast. You can find my draft board over at cbssports.com, or you can follow me on X at Mike Renner _.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate it. And let's have fun leading up to the draft, man.
For sure. You as well. Can't wait.